Okay, so in today's Daily Cyber, I'm going to be interviewing Joe Vest. He's one of the co-authors of Red Team Development and Operations. So if you're interested in pen testing, red team testing, really want to know the industry inside and out and what to do, this is a book and an interview you don't want to miss. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and let's hack at it. I'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, Usato. Usato is a Canadian-based cybersecurity company that provides 24/7 cybersecurity support and compliance service that align their customers' tolerance for risk, their clients, suppliers, and government contractual mandates. Usato's teams focus on using insights to drive business decisions. There's no need to leave strategies to chance, when insights can be used to show what changes need to be made and how to make them. Usato offers multiple services to help companies simplify IT, centralize cybersecurity management, and meet compliance standards. Usato can customize their service to work with your existing IT network and programs. For more information, contact Usato at info@uzado.com or visit their website at www.uzado.com. So, Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. How are you?
Oh, I'm amazing. Thank you so much for coming out to my podcast and being a guest. I loved your book.
Oh, appreciate that. It was a lot of fun and a lot of work to get done.
I was reading that the acknowledgement at the front. You were saying that everyone that you couldn't mention, you're going to give them hugs as you're running around through the industry.
Oh yeah. There's too many people to name. Just like everything else we do in this industry, we built on the backs of others. So this is just a collaboration of a lot of information and experience over the years.
Right. Now, you've been in the industry for 17 years?
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, my first IT job was in 1998, maybe 97, but around the end of 97, 98. So been a long time in the IT industry.
In the IT industry. So then how did you transition into cybersecurity?
So early on, being a young person doing security, went down the hole. This was in the .com boom days. The year 2000 stuff was going on. So a lot of the Y2K and a lot of those issues drove IT in general.
Right.
Security was just a job that I had. I was working for a mid-sized accounting firm by this time. I did not know security was a thing. I would go to conferences, and there was at a conference, and someone had these letters behind their name that said CISSP. This is in the early 2000s. I had no idea what that meant.
Right.
This person worked for a forensics company, and they were doing a presentation on accounting forensics and such. But that wasn't important to me. I went and talked to this guy afterwards and said, "What is this? How do you get in this?" And that really opened my eyes that, security is its own discipline. And this CSSP is a thing. And I said, well, that sounds really interesting. You can go do security testing. You can do all these things that I had no idea was its own discipline. I came back from that and started to do a lot of my own security tests and realized I was terrible at security. And I had all kinds of problems that I discovered at that organization I was at. And but my whole eye and my mind exploded in new ideas and new things that I could do. So in those early 2000s, I started shifting, and I went and got my CSSP. I actually took 9 months, read the entire book, did it the whole, I'll call it the right way, not the boot camp way.
Right.
And it gave me a huge foundation of where I needed to learn, not just a certification. And from that point on, I learned that you can go do professional hacking, security testing, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I just busted my butt nonstop until I could make that break. It took a long time to actually break into security, but probably in the early 2000s is when I put myself on course.
So now, when you first got your certification, the CISSP, is that more governance, policies? It's not really hacking per se, correct?
Not at all. But I didn't know. I was alone. I didn't have a community. I wasn't part of the security community. I was just by myself learning this and just starting to absorb some security podcasts that were starting at the time, reading information. And I started learning about that. Now, hindsight 2020, I see perspective CISSP has. It's not way up here. It's kind of like I'd call it a good medium or entry level certification to give you those foundations. At the time, it was a step that I needed, and not the certification, but the training and learning. I did that repeatedly with a bunch of other certs. And I realized even today, certification's value, we don't have to go down that route, but I don't value them very much anymore in my career now. But at the time,
Right.
they gave me a roadmap to
So,
do something. They were a
so
stepping stone to move forward.
let me ask you about that. I mean, and now you don't value them as much right now. Is that because of your experience?
Yeah, the experience and the certification market is really tough to where you can get certified in anything and then it qualifies you.
Right.
And I treat certifications as a minimum bar, not at a maximum bar. And in the
For
industry,
sure.
a lot of times we look at that as, oh, I got this XYZ certification, so now I'm qualified. No, no, no. You hit the minimum bar. It's a good bar to hit, and it's better
Right.
to have a minimum than nothing. But you could go to school and pass your classes with a C or maybe even a D, depending on the class.
Right.
And that's how I view certifications is, hey, I just barely got over the hump
Right.
to kind of say that I can do this. I wasn't going to go down the certification route, but I
Well, I mean,
also, I
got,
encourage young guys or young females to go and do this as well, because anyone who wants to do security or any sort of technical thing, a certification is a really good path to lay out a defined scope of things to work on, you
right.
know? And if you treat it right, if you actually go and learn and your focus is not the certification, but on learning, you can gain a lot out of it.
Well, I think
So that's what I did early on.
and I think, you kind of showed the path too, in the sense that there's, formal education where you go to now, you can go to college or university and focus in cybersecurity, or
Yep.
the other path is going in the sense of certifications and getting a whole bunch of certifications underneath you. All of them, and I totally agree with you, is a stepping point of basic knowledge, information, and then you need experience to tie that in together. Now,
Oh yeah.
depending on the path and journey you want to take, there's governance and policies and procedures. There's blue team type of configuration and setup, right, and hardening networks, and then there's kind of the red team side, like you do, and this is what your book's really about, is how to really look at assessing and helping companies penetrate vulnerability testing and assessment, red team types exercise of making sure that they know what their gaps are and show in real time. And I think the certifications, and just going back to that, I think that gives people more of an entry level education of, this is what it is. This is what
Yep.
you're going to be doing. Are you interested? And when you pass that certification, good, you have this base knowledge, but now you have to go do the work.
Oh yeah. You got to get out there and do it. And but again, um, although that they're less important to me now, it's just because I've been doing this in a while, and they're great resume builders. I mean,
Right.
I did that early on in the whole MCSE Microsoft route. I really went in all the Microsoft certs, did all those kinds of things, did the Cisco certification route, and those were great resume builders to help me move throughout my career and use that as a nice little gold star on my resume.
Right.
And it can backfire as well, because I have had an interview where someone says you need to take all your Cisco experience off your resume
Okay.
because I was jumping the gun a little too fast, and it put me in my place. And I said, I guess I don't know this as much as I thought I did. So I had to go take a step back and learn. But it's an iterative process that you go through. You do some certifications, you learn some things. Certifications aren't required, but on a career path, although they're not my favorite things anymore, I recommend anyone new to anything in IT to go to do certifications, because they're a small distinguisher, and at least it shows, hey, there's some effort I'm going to take to go get this thing done. Like I said, it's a minimum bar. I would like to see people at least hit a minimum bar
Right.
as they move through their career.
Well, like you said, it gives you a base knowledge. So when I've been on the other side of the table where I've been interviewing people, and at least it gives you that base, that they have a base knowledge. So at least you can talk to them. And then when they're coming in, you're going to have to train them, right, on your
Oh yeah.
environment, on your technology and everything that you're doing. But at least when you're talking to them, they're not like that kind of glazed eye look going, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yep, that is definitely what you hope to get out of it. And as long, again, it's your personal preference on how you take that. You can do a boot camp where you just cram, get the check mark for the certification, but you don't learn anything. Or you can actually spend the time to dig through it and learn it and move forward. Some certifications are better than others on that. Some really encourage you to boot camp it, and their value are lower.
Right.
Some actually, have at least a little bit of knowledge that you need to have to get through it. So,
And I think my recommendation on people is to actually look at taking the certification to gain the knowledge, not to brain dump. And we see this, and I
Oh,
saw
yeah.
that with the Microsoft, where you get these brain dumps and you memorize them.
Oh, I
And
know what you're talking about. The MCSE brain dump
yeah,
sites left and right. Oh my gosh, those are terrible.
yeah, and you memorize it for the exam, and then you walk out and you're like, I don't know a thing. Active
Yep.
Directory, what? Yeah, I don't know. Group
Yeah.
policies.
Oh man, you're bringing back some old days there.
But that's the thing, right?
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
recommend, if you're looking at certifications, and anyone watching this, do it for the education, do it for preparation for your career. Don't do it because you got a certification and you got like an acronym or you got a few letters behind
Oh
your
yeah.
name, and right. Hey, I've got, CISSP or, OSCP, or, we're looking at hacking, which you can't get, which is a real world, actual test. You have to actually do work
Yep.
to show your work.
Yeah.
But like, even like some of the ones that are more theory based, right? Make sure you do the work, because it's going to provide you value when you get into the career, right? And what you're doing. So now let me ask you, like, since we kind of jumped in this, what are some things or some areas that now that if you could have known when you started, you would have changed and done differently?
Oh man. First thing, honestly, is security and IT is brutal. The service
Okay.
industry in general is just a brutal, harsh environment. It's very competitive. Now, yes, we have a good community and people are working together, but it's really hard.
Right.
What that also means, it's really hard from when you look at it from a business side. And I'd say this business aspect was the biggest thing that I had to learn uh, going through this process, to where if you're a hotshot IT person and you really know your stuff and you can configure, build things, or you are, security left and right, and you know how to make it all work and test everything, it doesn't matter at all if those who are going to pay for your services don't care,
Right.
or they don't understand uh, that. I learned this, and this hit me really, really hard. I was very young in my career. I was probably maybe 3 or 4 years into it, and I was doing. And this time was IT, trying to shift into security, doing all these great projects, making things happen, like fixing all the stuff, making it happen. The CFO, I sat down with the CFO of this company and was talking about all these IT efforts and stuff, and he took a step back and said, "Okay, look, this is great. I'm happy that you're doing all this stuff, but everything you're doing is like the water company. It's either on or off. There's no quality. It's
Right.
like power or water. You have it or you don't. I don't have better power or better water being delivered to me." So from his perspective, all of these services, IT, security, was a commodity, and
Right.
that's how he treated it. And I saw how this worked, and this it changed everything that I did. And I said, okay, I actually started doing more IT and security PM roles. So I started
Okay.
on projects, and I engaged directly with those who had issues and problems, whether they're security problems, technical problems, whatever it was, and said, okay, what is what's the challenge we're trying to do? And the biggest thing I learned was, when someone says this is what they want, that's not necessarily the case. You need to really
Okay.
sit down and talk to them and understand where their needs are, so that you
Right.
can actually deliver a solution to those needs, not having something prescribed to you. And you need to learn how to take those, whenever you're working on some challenge, all the prescriptive things that are given to you, to say, okay, what is my goal? What am I really trying to do? Am I walking through this process because someone said I need this widget? Well, maybe they don't need that. Maybe they're trying to
Right.
do something else. This gets into scoping nowadays, with if you're doing vulnerability tests, pen test, red teaming, whatever kind of security test you want. Someone will come to you and say, I need XYZ test. You don't just say, okay, here, it costs $10,000, and here, let's go do this test.
Right.
That's the wrong approach. You need to take a step back and start to ask questions about, what are the goals? What are you trying to do? Then you can back that into the appropriate test. That's
Right.
the biggest thing that I learned from this. This is a service industry component. And this is part of living in the service industry.
So more on the business side and business delivery. Is that what I'm understanding?
Oh yeah, yeah. I always say, any of us in the security world who are doing testing, we are doing things in someone else's playground. This is not our playground. This is not our environment. This is not our system. We are going somewhere, whether you're an internal person or you're a consultant, you've been invited to come in and play on their playground. If you don't play by the rules, you don't do it right, you can just get kicked out. It's like, I don't like that. You're not playing by my rules. If you don't like my rules, then go.
Right.
So you need to start to take a step back and say, okay, wait, if I want to go play in these other environments, I need to understand what those problems are.
Right.
I need to know how to engage with this leadership, so I can take all of this great technical knowledge and apply it
Right.
to achieve those goals.
It's interesting you talk about that, because I know being in a account managing, account executive type roles, a lot of companies want you to go forward with their technologies, their solutions, and we're the best, we're top of this, we do things better. And I'm learning over time and distance, especially the more I'm in this industry, exactly what you're saying. The conversation is not about we are the best, we do this the best. It's what the business needs, or what that person across the table is needing. And specifically, when you get higher up in the chain of the business and C-suite, VPs, directors, it's more the business need versus actually the actual technology need. Right, where a lot of people go, well, you need a firewall, but why? You need a SIM, but why? You need endpoint protection, okay, but why? What's the business need? Right? Is it compliance?
Oh yeah.
Is it compliance? Is it something else that's pushing the business? And then when you start having those conversations, you can tell more on what they need, and then tie in the solution to that, versus we need a SIM, okay, but then here we'll look at all these different SIMs. They're like, okay, we got a SIM, but if you don't know what the business need is, you're selling them a device or a solution that they might change out, might not meet their needs. They might not be able to use it as a profit center. They'll use it as a cost center, and they'll start to kind of look at, cutting costs and doing all that, because they don't understand how it's going to benefit the business. Right. And having that conversation is important.
What I've seen with that is even building out relationships and trust with those who want to bring you on to help with their services.
Right.
Obviously, my perspective is a lot from an external consultant type perspective, but I've also been an internal person. But we're always, we have some customer, some person that we're serving these services to. But what happens is someone asks you for their thing, for a security test of some sort. You start to learn what they want, and they really just want you to understand flaws against an application.
Right.
And it might be a simple application security assessment. What you do, instead of like saying, well, let's do this whole big red team engagement or some other large engagement, you focus on what they want, and you deliver that, and you deliver that well. You build that trust and relationship, and then you can actually say, hey, by the way, while we were looking at this, we saw these other areas of interests. These could, if we analyze those and fix those, it could have this sort of impact on your organization. Not, let's go find all the bad things. Here's a big punch list of bad things to go fix. See you later.
Right.
No, we need to map this back to some sort of operational risk that actually they care about.
Right.
I know if I was starting to run and as a former business owner, my risks, I would choose risks and take on risks, because that's what you do. And that might mean from a perfect security world, that was low or lower.
Right.
Sometimes you take on those risks because that's what you have to do. You don't have unlimited resources, unlimited capability. So when you can start to focus specifically on understanding the problem set,
right,
you can actually use those resources effectively and get to the point. Surprise, surprise. A lot of people in the world don't really care about security.
Right.
They say they do, but they don't. Because then you're like, well, that's hard, that's bad. Then they say, let's just accept the risk.
Right.
And that's the world we live in. So you need to have, that's like, gets back to, things I wish I knew starting out was, wow, not everyone really cares about security. So how do you have passion and move forward in something where the industry who's paying for you to actually play on this, in this playground, is willing to participate?
And I think that's
tough.
And I think that's why it's important to understand the business needs with the technology, because if you can talk in that level, that if they have an old Windows 95 system that has an old database on it, and you say, hey, that could be compromised, is there really a business need for that? It's because it's maybe an archaic system that sometimes once a year they have to audit and for whatever data is there. And if it's not really connected to anything, maybe it's not like an access point. But if their main website, e-commerce, there's a vulnerability there and they're going to lose money, yeah, they're going to want to fix that, right? And if they're losing $10,000 to $1 million a day because of e-commerce, trust me, that's something they're going to want to look at, because it's the business requirement, business need. And then as like with compliance, right? If someone has a compliance need, PCI, DSS, they have, ISO 27001, they have NIST, whatever that may be, HIPAA, health information, they're running under compliance. Trust me, they're going to want to get those things fixed because they want to make sure their business is running properly and they're not running any issues. So I think it's important when you're talking about the consultants and business that are out there trying to promote and sell, is to really understand the business that they're talking to and what their needs are.
Yeah, that's last couple years of my career, I have spent most of my time on that side of the world, working with leadership, senior leadership of a lot of different organizations to help them understand their complex problems.
Right.
And I fortunately have built up a pretty good knack for breaking through all the fluff and saying, let's get down to what we need. Let's find your core needs. Let's address those. Let's not keep talking about theoreticals. Let's come up with some realistic things we can move forward on, and do something which a good friend of mine would always say is, let's not make perfect the enemy of good.
Right.
In other words, let's find that good solution that meets what you need to do and move forward.
Right.
Because that's another issue is actually taking action and moving forward on that. If you find 1,000 flaws in my system, that doesn't help me.
Right.
I need to understand context of what can be actually achieved and done. So
right. And something to add on to that is then you look at, because they might have 20 other projects they're working on, their team their resources might be already stretched. And now you give a list of 1,000 things to do. Okay, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, we're already busy as it is, and we have a certain amount of budget for this roadmap for this year. What do you want me to do with this? And like you said, categorizing it in, this is high priority, this is low, and this is, kind of mid-range, helps them to decide, okay, where they need to spend their time and their efforts.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have to bring solutions, not problems.
Exactly.
So back to some things I've learned over the years,
Right.
and I highly encourage people to do and to really focus on that side. Technical side is really, really important. I'm not discounting that.
Right.
But the technical side can really be overshadowed if you don't have context and understanding of how to deal with the problems at hand from a business side.
And I think that's a key point is, and people that are watching this or listening to this, if you're on the technical side and that's what you enjoy and that's what you're passionate, have a technical job, right? Work with the team, right? Work with a business acumen, and then have other people that more speak the business dialogue, the business conversation. I work with people constantly that they're amazing on the technical side. They just don't want to have those conversations on the business side because that's not where they have their passion. That's not what they enjoy. They enjoy being deep into the technology. So,
oh yes, no, it takes both sides. Now, with that note, I still encourage everyone to get out of that uncomfortable zone and say, well, I can't speak to people. And I say, no, you need to talk to people.
Right.
This whole industry is about relationships, it's about speaking with people.
Right.
You need to get out there. You have a voice to say. It's a small industry. When you're working in this industry, you see how small the security community is.
Right.
There's room for everybody. It is not a large community. I was very surprised at how quickly I was able to kind of talk and meet and know a lot of the arguably major players in the community. Not that that's a big deal. It's a small community. So it's not hard if you put yourself out there, it's not hard to become part of that. And
very quickly.
I definitely encourage everyone to get out there and put themselves in front
if they can. I mean, like I said, the one thing that my caveat is that you just know some people, like, it's like, what I think was one of the top 5 fears is public speaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Good thing I had a lot of people, anyone who's worked on my team, and if anyone ever listens to this who's worked on my team, they know I'm like, now you're getting out there. We're going to go through this at least once.
Right.
I want you to go through this. And then we can say, okay, that may not be for you, but I can't tell you how many times I've got people to break through that.
Good.
Because even if it's at a minimum, if you're highly technical and you can't explain anything, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If no one understands, but you cannot explain those things, let's explain it like if you're a 5th grader or a 1st grader, to say, let's go in basic terms, let's break this down. How does this work?
Right.
And then you can work up into the more technical things. So you still have to have that communication skill.
Yeah.
Still highly, highly important.
And I agree with that. And I agree in the sense that, balancing out the soft skills with the technical skills is very important. Right. If you can do it, I just like with the people that I've talked to, the uncomfortableness, trying to give them a little bit of cushion and a little buffer that it's okay if you're not an expert in that area, you don't feel comfortable, you still have your technical skills, skills, both are needed. So just, as I know, like, even myself doing videos and starting out, I knew how uncomfortable it was being on TV and kind of doing interviews and things like that when you first get into it, where all these lights, all these cameras are shining on you and you're kind of going, what do I say? Like, what do I do? Right. And they look at you and they're looking at you go, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah. I hear you on that. I'm not saying that it's
Yeah.
easy, but you can get into a groove and get through it.
Yeah, for sure. So now let's talk about this book. Why
Sure.
why did you go into writing this book? You know, you're doing all this, your
That
business,
book,
you're consulting, you're all that. Now you've got this red team
yeah,
development operations book.
that was never the idea to have a book.
Okay.
So myself and James, the other co-author on this
Hmm.
book, have been working together on and off for a long time now. We were both kind of our careers kind of put us together and started doing red teaming together for a while. So we were working together in the red teaming space for a while,
Right.
and just like anything, and this would be quite a few years ago. So a lot of the models, the processes and stuff were not always formed. There was other groups who were doing this. So we would kind of put processes behind in our minds and go through this and how are we going to actually operate. Both James and I were very much built on the process side, where we felt that the processes and the foundation were as or even more important than the technical solutions. In other words, you can't just apply technical problems to these especially large complex systems where you're doing full threat red teaming. There's a lot of risks, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of things to deal with and handle. You've got to have a really strong foundation so that someone can allow you to come play in that playground again.
Right.
So if you have a team of people doing not just simple pen testing, not to trivialize pen testing, but if you're going really, really in-depth adversarial, causing operational impacts, you want to have some control.
Right.
So as we were working on these really large red team engagements, we kind of put this in our mind. Well, we left that organization and we started our own company. And at the time, we had some notes and some things that we were kind of flushing in our head. And I said, well, I want to do something. I want to really formalize this whole red team process in a practical manner.
Okay.
And we were looking at how we're going to do this. And this is where I reached out to Sands. And I actually said, well, let me propose this. And I drug James into this. He's like, what is you talking about, man? I don't want to go down that crazy route. What is this?
Right.
And so I wrote a proposal. I reached out to Sands and said, hey, I would like to do this. So I had a conversation with Ed Scotus at the time, who was in charge of all this, of the penetration testing curriculums and everything.
Okay.
And I was able to convince him, and he gave me a shot. I'd argue no one really knew who I was. I was not in the mainstream side of like security. I wasn't doing podcasts or blogs or doing anything crazy out there. I was kind of quiet. Now the industry and those in the community, they knew me,
Right.
because it was a small community within that red teaming community. So there was some knowledge there, but I convinced Sands to let me try this. And we wrote the first version of this Sands Section 564 red teaming course in about 4 months.
Okay.
We already had a lot of it kind of documented in our heads and just really like, paper napkin type notes. But we went from 0 to that in 4 months.
Wow.
And had the first beta class out there. And if you ever see that process, it's not just labs. The content is a tremendous amount of writing.
For sure.
To actually explain everything. So you're actually writing book. You're writing a technical manual. So I did that. Created a first 2-day class with them. Ran that for about 2 years. Sands and me didn't go well together.
Okay.
To try to move up the ladder, I could not. There's too much fighting of my own time. I was running my own company at the time with James, so we had a small 5-person security consulting team, and I was teaching all of these classes 8 to 9 times a year with Sands, and maintaining the material and doing all this. So, when I started to look to see something's got to give. I did not see anytime soon becoming a full certified instructor, the whole Sands route.
Right.
It just wasn't going to happen because I was only doing my 2-day class. So I said, well, thanks, Sands. It was fun. I'm going to take my stuff and go.
Right.
So it was my intellectual property. I let some time expire. And once that time came up, we said, hey, we're going to take this. We want to do something with this material. What are we going to do? We're just going to release it? I was about to just say, well, here we go. Let's just release it, blog post, put it out there. They said, talked with James, and we said, well, let's take a step back. Let's reorganize some of this material. We're not going to really write anything new. We're just going to clean it up and put it into book format.
Okay.
And get it out there. So we did that. It took some time. It took probably 6 months to actually get through that process, on and off of working, to get it converted from one format to the other. And then we finally released that this year in January, I think like the 24th or so of January. So we're about 3 months in,
Wow.
I guess, of this
Yeah.
book's release. And we put it out there. I was going to be happy to get 100 people to purchase it. It's done a little bit better than that. And it's had some good feedback.
Right.
And that's what I wanted to do. We really just wanted to have a practical framework for building a red team. A lot of people would ask me, hey, how do I build a red team?
Okay.
I was asked to build this. This red teaming thing is coming up. So a lot of that was the motivating factors. Any of the blog posts I was writing were directly related to a lot of the content in the book. We were putting this stuff out there. So the book just kind of formalized that.
Okay.
And this sounds terrible. It also gave us a break to say, put it out there, cut that off, and take a break from that side so we can have a defined end state.
Okay.
So we can actually take a breather, because there's just a lot of work to keep that thing updated and going.
Oh, for sure. Now, have you so you wrote the book, you put it out there. Are you doing consulting around this? Like, when I've read this book and I went through it, it's basically a roadmap, in my opinion, of someone that's looking at, and we talked about this before we started the recording, is someone starting the industry wants to kind of know about red teaming and kind of, pen testing and having a strong framework of how it works from start to finish. Also, you got like the operations side where you look at, people, like you said, that are looking at, being consultants and creating a business, but also companies that are looking at hiring pen testers should read this. Have you gone out and started to kind of consult around this and just...
So I was using this framework. I'd argue that this framework has been what I talked about anyway. So if you just came up and said, hey, can you talk about red teaming? You're going to see it's basically what I talk about in the book.
Right.
It's not that I wrote the book specifically to try to go have something different. This is my normal conversation about how I explain things and work through things. That's just matured over the years. And have things changed slightly?
Yeah.
Maybe some context, some wording, but the core is still there. The framework is still there on how to build an offensive security program.
Right.
And so in my consulting days, 100%, I would do this. I would help red teams get through this, or I'd help the inverse and help security defensive teams understand the red team process,
right,
and understand how threat emulation and adversarial actions can be useful to help you understand defense.
Right.
So I've kind of done both sides as a framework of knowledge. I have since left the consulting world to go into take a break from consulting.
Okay.
That's just because consulting it's grueling. I did consulting for 7+ years. I wanted to take a step back from just the grind of consulting and take a breath. And so I've changed to me a couple months ago to get out of the consulting world.
Right.
But the knowledge, if anyone asks me about this is what I talk about. I mean, I did a talk at the ISACA, the North America ISACA conference, which is an accounting, information security accounting and auditing conference. And this is what I talk about. I will go and talk about the concepts of adversarial emulation, threat emulation, red teaming. How do you apply a threat-based approach to your security tests?
Right.
So it's been a theme I've had for quite a while now.
Right. Which is great. I mean, like I said, when I read through this book, and you kind of see if anyone's seeing this, if you're reading it or just listening to this, I actually have tabs all throughout the book.
Yeah, you scared me with that.
Well, it's just, you're looking at things and you're kind of going, okay, well, that's actually a key point. And then you do it again. Actually, that's a key point to remember. And as I went through, and one skill I'm learning is speed reading. Right. And as you speed read, you're kind of going through, you're scanning these good points. And then when you go back for the second read through, then you're going back and highlighting kind of the areas that you're like, yeah, like that is something to memorize. Right. So as I was going through, I'm like, okay, tab that. And almost at one point I was like, I think I'm tabbing the whole book. And then I had to kind of take a step back and go, okay, what's essential to memorize that, in conversation, that when I'm talking to people and clients, and even just for myself to understand the industry, what is essential to learn. And I found, like, when you look through like the tabs I have in this, probably a good percentage, like I would say 40% of the book is tabbed, in the sense that things that I think anyone who's looking at red teaming needs to know, or at least if they don't know it now, they should at least read this book and go through that conversation, right? And kind of get this in their kind of their vocabulary and their understanding, because it's a strong framework, right? To work with clients, to work in the business, to be able to do that.
Oh, I agree. This is this is what I saw missing from the red teaming community. We lots of good technical things, and I'm not discounting that. I could have went and written another, like, here's how you build out a red team with technical components, and here's how you attack this, this, and this.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of that stuff out there. It's free. The company that I worked for prior released most of this information free, anyways. So this just felt over the years, the thing that was missing was the operations side.
Right.
And this gets into, okay, so you have all these smart technical people. How are you going to herd those cats and to deliver something meaningful? How are you going to actually give something that's going to cause some sort of impact to operation, to truly understand how to measure security operations and look at it holistically from this red teaming threat perspective, and move forward more than just bug hunting
Right.
and flaw identification? Not that that's bad, but we already have frameworks to talk about how to go and do flaw identification and find bugs, and then go through this patch, find a bug, get it patched, test, and go through that cycle,
Right.
which is fine. But this gets beyond all the gaps that I saw from people trying to understand this adversarial approach
Right.
to enhance their security testing.
Right. Just to really understand, and what you talk about in the book is to really understand the mind of the hacker, right? And how they think and how they're going to work through different processes for themselves, right? And then how you're actually framing that for you to protect your environment. So it's kind of that different mindset, just kind of understanding that. It was good to kind of see that written out, that, yeah, and I worked physical security for several years, and that was one of the things we always looked at is, if someone could compromise a lock, a window, or all that, does the alarm system really matter, right? If they can actually get in the response time. Like, one of the things that, one of the areas I worked with, they were at an actual physical location. It was a warehouse, and they had a window, and they said, okay, yeah, with the window, and we have security, and we have alarm systems and cameras and all that, but they can actually break in that window, get in, take whatever they need, and the response time could be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes for the police. So they could already be gone, right, in that time. So what else do you have what else measures do you have? Then you have insurance, like transference, right? We talk about like insecurity. So they had all these other measures because, we do our best. We have these measures in place of cameras, lighting, fences, locks, things like that. But if they get in, they get in. And then we have insurance to help with that. So, but they knew that, as they thought, is how would the criminal think? Well, if they're going to get through the window, there's not much we can do. We can actually barbed wire the window or put bars there or something along that line. But how much more can we go? If they want to get in, they're going to get in. Right. But at least they.
Yeah. And I look at the whole concept of what was looking from this is from my definition and how I've always defined red teaming.
Yeah.
Where I really want to focus on the defensive concept. So if you start from right to left and say, okay, some organization has created defensive program. They've hired people, they have tools, they have programs to prevent and detect and respond.
Right.
So many of our security tests focus on the preventative side.
Right.
That would say you can or cannot do this. It's some binary type approach, and that's fine. That's great. That's a level of attack surface measurement. So you can say, well, the attack surface is pretty open or it's pretty narrow.
Right.
But regardless of the attack surface size, there's always a surface. And really what you're looking for is, what value are you getting from your security operations as a whole? Can they not just prevent, but can they detect? If they detect, can they respond and actually recover? You have all of these components that can be looked at,
right,
and measure and understand. The blue team, the security defense, is the primary objective of how I put red team operations into play. So you're looking at, what did we spend all of our money on? What did we spend all our resources on? We send everyone to training. They're supposed to protect, detect, respond, and recover. How is this really working? And you can build out a red team engagement that focuses on that.
right.
Do you use flaws and exploits and all that? Yes, you do. Can it look and feel a lot like a pen test? Very much so. But the big difference is the intent. Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to identify flaws and identify attack paths? Or are you trying to move through an environment in some sort of threat way to elicit either a response from detection, measure the capability of the defensive team,
Right.
depending on the goals.
Right.
And that's really what you're trying to focus on.
Right. And that makes sense, right? Because you want to test your environment. If you get someone that's in, then there's nothing happening, then what's the point, right? And you come back with a report, and like some pen testing teams I've seen, they come back with a report and say, yeah, you need to fix this. We were in and we got this way. Okay, but yes, so what? Like, what are we supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
And then they start the questions on the client side as well. What about the firewall? Was there alerts? Well, did you get through this? What happened with their SIM? Like, they want to know all these informations, but like you said, if you can kind of think as the pen testing team, in my opinion, that way to help the blue team, to help kind of identify these things, I think it's a way better engagement.
Yeah. And I tend to separate pen testing, vulnerability assessments, and red teaming and put them in their own categories. They have a lot of crossover, but I do that because, and I talk about this in the book as well, we in our security industry shoot ourselves in the foot through definitions. Go follow Twitter and say, hey, here's my definition of red teaming, and watch what happens.
Right.
You're going to get 1,000 different reasons of what things are. And what I see, I'll go back to the business operations to be able to communicate effectively, is I define red teaming like, it is like this, it is like that. And I see, oh, we've already failed. You should be very concise and specific in your definition. So even in the book,
right.
I have the book, take a step back. The book's layout is each chapter has some sort of homework at the end.
Right.
Basically, I want to have some practical guide that says, based on what you just read, these are the things you should be able to apply and do immediately.
Right.
Go work on this. One of those components is creating your definition, your lexicon of terms.
Right.
Because I want to have a common base of communication and a common language when we go and have communications, because I see this all the time. Someone says, I need a red team. I want you to come do some super elite hack and see if you can break all the things. From my definition, that is not a red team engagement.
Right.
You're looking at some very technical penetration test that's trying to validate some sort of attack path.
Right.
It's not bad. It's not saying one is better than the other. It's just different.
Right.
So we have to have that baseline of understanding and commonality of terms, because we do so bad to our own industry and hurt ourselves with the whole red teaming. Red teaming has a big buzzword. It's really cool. It looks good in sales. And I can't tell you how often, or I'll hear the word red team pen test.
Right.
And I'm like, you're just confusing everyone.
Right.
Take a step back. Let's come up with something simple. Let's explain, what does this mean? Not just use a word, but what is the meaning behind that word? And it makes a huge difference.
Right.
I take that to pretty much any meeting I go to. I baseline pretty much every single time, especially if it's a new group, to have an understanding of what everyone's terms and understanding are. And I am not going to be a red team elitist that says we have to use the word red teaming. I personally don't care what we call it.
Right.
I look at this in terms of goals.
Right.
Like, what are we trying to achieve? That's what our goals are. We can put whatever label we want to around that.
Right. And which is better, because then it defines it for everyone in the room, right? So everyone's talking the same language. No, I completely understand. So if I was starting out in kind of in this environment, and what advice would you give to someone that's watching this, someone's listening right now, someone that's starting a pen testing team, that's wanting to start an engagement? What are some recommendations? Other than, and we'll hold you on there.
Oh,
reading your book. Start with this.
Yeah. Well, if you're wanting to go, so with that, since you say the book, if you're looking at building out a red team and you have, and you're starting on that end, I do recommend the topics that I put in the book. I have the companion website has a lot of stuff.
For sure.
It's just available for anybody. It's just out there. So that's just available. There are tons of resources out there to learn how to do this. The main thing that I would say is, if you're trying to do red teaming, define what it is and look at it from a goal. What are your goals? Why do you need a red team? How is this going to be different from your pen test? And you need to have that knowledge first.
Right.
So you need to have an understanding of what are you trying to understand. If you have goals of training and or measuring security operations as a whole, then you can probably put that into a red team category, and you might want to build some red teaming, which then leads into, well, how do you run an offensive security program?
Right.
How do you actually build this out? You're going to have technical people who can actually execute these things. You're going to have to get into, especially now, things have changed quite a bit over the years to where it's harder. Defensive teams have gotten better. So your technical chops have to be much better.
Right. And
not just in exploitation, but actually running, managing command and control, building out your own tools and payloads. And it really fundamentally comes working backwards. You have to understand the technology that you're going against.
Okay.
So You see Windows environments a lot with Windows attacks and all sorts of related in the Windows domain world. Well, you can't do any of those things if you don't understand how Windows
Right.
operates, and you don't understand how Windows domain operates. You don't understand how authentication operates. You don't understand how processes and tokens are actually being utilized as Windows is doing its thing.
Right.
So back to the basics. You have to have a fundamental understanding of the IT that you're doing security on.
Okay.
Security to me is just an extension of IT. We are all just sysadmins with a different job.
Right.
That's really how I kind of view that.
Okay.
So you can't just go hack stuff if you don't understand it. You need to have a fundamental understanding of how that works. Application security testers, something I did for a long time, without an understanding of how like HTTP protocols work,
Okay.
how the actual code executes and runs, whether you're talking about Java or C# or whatever language you're using. If you don't understand that, you're going to be very limited.
Right.
So the core piece of that is you have to have the basics. You need to have an understanding of the underlying technologies that you're working for,
Okay.
that you're looking at.
Interesting. So yeah, would you recommend someone starting out maybe kind of look at more blue team side? If you look at system in programming, network infrastructure, kind of look at that side first before they jump into security?
Well, you can do this parallel, and it's tough, and it's possible, especially with resources now. And you can kind of skip some steps, if you will. Now, there are huge pros to have had a sysadmin background or a developer background. There's some really, really good benefits for that.
Right.
Not everyone has that, or if you go to school now and you go to cybersecurity school and you come out, hey, I'm some security person now. Well, you have some base understanding of attack techniques, but you just don't have that framework of how Windows operates and stuff. But you can learn this on your own.
Right.
So you can kind of start in the middle, knowing that just because you've got your degree or some sort of qualification that you understand security, you still need to backfill that somehow.
Right.
And that's going to be through more education.
Right.
Looking at in the cloud security world, there are a ton of certifications. We'll talk certifications again.
Yeah.
That can really help that world. I actually see that being a new open area for people to explore that still has a lot of room to do new, interesting things. It just hasn't been done. Cloud security type environments also leads into, I would argue, application security. They're very, very tightly related. So then you can go and build that up. But either way, no matter where you are, if you're starting fresh or you're kind of starting in the middle because you've gone through some security degree, you've got to make sure that foundation is there in some form. You have to understand networking. You have to understand protocols, how these things work, the basic whole TCP/IP protocol stack and all the related pieces.
OSI model.
If you don't know that, if you don't have that foundation and an operational understanding, you're going to have limits.
Right.
If you don't understand how applications work, you're going to have limits when you see an HTTP request. What are you going to do with that? Does it mean anything to you?
Right.
Or if you say, hey, I'm sitting on a Windows box. Okay, now what? What can I do? I mean, how do I execute something? What are my limits? How do I actually utilize credential material that I've captured?
Right.
So it goes back to having an operational understanding of the technology, the underlying technologies that you're working with.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, it's so much work. Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I mean, and talking and understanding the industry from even being on IT for myself starting out, I mean, you work your 9 to 5 or even 9 to 8 sometimes, depending on, how deep your team is and how busy you are. And then at the end of the day, you have to go home and study, right? And you have to keep learning, keep developing. I mean, it's not easy. And as you move up in your career, you work with different companies, depending on the workload. I mean, having that availability to have that time, that work-life balance to be able to study, 2 hours a night to kind of keep up and ramp yourself up can be hard. It can be difficult.
Oh, yeah. And okay, so I've worked, and I just left when I was working over at Spectre Ops with those guys for the last like 2.5+ years. A lot of really, really talented people.
Right.
And when you start to say, okay, how are they doing what it is? It's because they are highly passionate about what they're doing. And in their free time, sure, they may go play Xbox, they may go watch TV or something, but a huge component of what they want to do is studying and learning is not a burden. It is a joy and a true fascination.
Right.
Not saying everyone can do that. Sometimes a job is just a job, But if you want to take the next level up and really be good, when you have that passion, you're going to work on it just because, like, I want to spend the next 4 hours like digging into this weird technical problem
Right.
that no one's paying me for. I'm just sitting here. It's a Saturday night. I'm not going out. I'm not doing anything. And I'm just going to work on this and totally nerd out.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's if that becomes like a hobby and passion, then that's great. All of those people that I've known who are really good that you see, who publish information out there, who put all these great tools out there, that's what they're doing. They are living and breathing this constantly, and they built up that foundation to where now when they attack a new problem, they can do it fairly quickly because they have the information just kind of gains and gains as you go through, and you just get better at doing that type of stuff.
For sure. So any recommendations you have, other than the book, kind of other than what we've talked about so far, anything that you have recommendations for potentially people are looking for red team engagement?
If you're going to go, well, first of all, I'll say again, you need to understand if red teaming is right for you. So you need to understand what those goals are if you're going to do this. If you decide that you want to go and pursue red teaming if you're a technical person, you need to have those technical chops, which means you're going to need to understand all of those things we were just talking about.
Right.
So you're going to have to build this up. I'd argue that a good red teamer sometimes could be considered maybe a senior in other areas and other parts of our industry.
Okay.
Just because you've got to be a jack of all trades. You really do have to understand this whole environment. You might be on a Windows box, you might be on a Linux box. You're going to have to deal with routing and networking components. You're going to hit applications.
Right.
These can be local applications that you may have to decompile and do some craziness things to. You may have network applications, or you may have web applications you're going to deal with. So all of those are there.
Right.
With that said, I would pick one or two and start to drive down that.
Okay.
I personally went down the application security route. That's how I was able to break into security, because there was a lack of people doing it at the time.
Right.
And even me doing it poorly allowed me to jump into that realm.
Right.
To do that. If you already have, now on the flip side, if you already have an established program and you're wanting to incorporate red teaming, I would just recommend building out a threat focused engagement and just running through it. Go through red teaming best practices, not for the sake of discovering some really good flaw on your network or some sort of measurement of the blue or red blue team. Mm-hmm. But actually just understand if you have some way of actually executing. Can I control these steps? Can I execute on target, keep on my log, keep things moving forward, maintain command and control, do some lateral movement, and basically just walk through the steps that make up the core things that you're doing during an engagement.
Okay.
That's what I recommend for everyone. Or if you can hire someone, I'm not kind of trying to promote any consulting, but side-by-side execution is a great way for someone to get kind of walk through that. A lot of people are like, I don't really know what I'm doing and I've never done it. Well, if you can get someone who's done it and they just sit there and kind of advise, they don't actually touch the keyboard or do anything. They say, hey, you probably need to do this. We need to move to this phase. Let's make sure we're capturing this information, and the blue team is responding. Here's how we need to handle that from a red perspective. And that gives a huge safety net and comfort. I did that quite a bit, actually.
Okay.
That gives a huge comfort to a team who's kind of questioning themselves and trying to walk through this new world, where they have someone they can say, okay, this person's done it. This team has done it. Let's lean on them and see what we can do. And once you do that once or twice, you're fine and you can move forward.
Okay. No, that's good advice. Last question on my side is, in 2020, what would you recommend from what you've seen, kind of what you've worked with? What would you recommend companies really take a look at? I mean, looking at data protection, you got cloud solutions you talked about, you look at, compliance. What are some areas as a red teamer, someone that's an expert in the field, you'd recommend in 2020 companies need to start taking a look at these areas?
I'll actually say there's two areas. One, the whole cloud computing area. Yeah. Computers are computers. Technology is technology. There's not a lot of difference. The difference now is we just have a little bit more complexities in these. So we have more of the DevOps application security components. So there's unknown risks.
Right.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. There's some unknown components to that. Implementation could look very, very similar to what we've already been doing traditionally.
Right.
So the whole cloud security component, the DevOps side, is a huge area for people to explore.
Okay.
The other side that I'd say is the most valuable is we need to understand as an industry, or anyone who's utilizing security services, are our defenses working?
Okay.
And I don't mean preventative controls. I mean, we have a security defensive team. We have this threat hunting team. They have all these things that we say they need to do. Are they doing it? Can they actually operate effectively? When you have a detection and they say, we found this. So what?
Right.
What's the so what factor? Can they actually stop that? Can they prevent it? Are they actually able to engage a realistic threat?
Okay.
That gets into a red side and a blue side, to where we really need to understand, are our defenses working as designed?
Okay.
So when you have leadership say, hey, how are we doing over here on our detections? Like, no, we've had no breaches, or everything's going great. Our patch levels are up, whatever silly metrics that are going on. Now you need to see, where does the rubber hit the road on how does our defenses actually operate from protection. So all the preventative controls, detection as well. You need to be able to identify a threat activity, and then that's good. But then even more important, I'd argue, is, can you respond to that?
Right.
Can you actually deal with that problem? Being able to say, I see you. It's like, okay, you see me, I'm on your network. Can you do anything about that?
Right.
And move through those phases. Basically, does your security operations program work?
Right.
That is probably the biggest takeaway I see that we need as an industry.
And that comes down to some things that we've been covering more and more this year is breach response, incident response, kind of those areas, disaster recovery, business continuity, kind of those areas as a business, you look at too, just to make sure that, especially with COVID-19 and the pandemic, that they're all up to date, because the landscape is completely changed, to make sure that, like you said, if something does happen, they can respond to it. So, and it's been modified for our new environment.
Yeah. So I think, what is your detection strategy? What's your approach to understanding that? I argue that red teaming is not an offensive sport.
Right.
It is actually a defensive sport. We don't exist to do bad things. We actually are a subset of the security defensive team.
Right.
We're there to identify any sort of issues and challenges and make them better, so that if we do some sort of engagement and advice is taken, the second time we do that, it's going to be much harder for us from an offensive security perspective.
For sure.
So a lot of those types of things is re-understanding our role from an offensive security, the offensive security industry. I would even put this into pen testing and vulnerability testing. We are really all part of the blue team. We are all part of the defensive team. That is really what we need to do. So back to that whole, we need to bridge those gaps from relationships, have everyone come together, and really focus on improving what's important.
It's great points. It's like I said, amazing having this conversation with you, especially at this time when you look at everything that's happening in the environment with the COVID-19 and the companies are now changing, remote workers and VPN access, and, data is kind of off the network a lot of times, and they're setting up cloud solutions. So everything's had to change overnight. So having this great conversation with you about the red team operations, kind of what companies need to look at, it's been so helpful. And hopefully the people that are watching this are getting some value and getting some ideas of what they need to look at and what they need to kind of reevaluate, especially on their security posture and their security maturity program and what they're working on. So thank you so much, Joe.
Oh yeah. It's been great.
Yeah. So is there anything else you kind of want to add? You wanted to share?
I just think that I'm very humbled that anyone purchased this book. Honestly, I'm not an author. James is not an author. We just are practitioners in the industry who have been pushing this idea, and it's a solid idea. It's a solid plan that's practical and useful for people. So I was happy that anyone actually purchased this thing and contributed to help with this industry. So I'm just thankful, and I'm humbled that it's even available for people to acquire.
So I'll do one better for you. Someone that is growing in the field and kind of, had an interest myself into pen testing and, red team and, OSCP. I found this book one of my kind of essential reads to give that framework and understanding. So I would say it's actually essential, part of, if your library, if you're in security and cybersecurity in any area, you should have this book as a resource that you review and you kind of go back through, just because it gives a great foundation and great knowledge. So it's great that you came out with it and you decide that, you'd provide the industry with that. So I'm going to say that on my point, right, from someone who's read the book cover to cover, a few times, speed reading through.
All right, then I'll change it. So everyone in the security industry, it's a required book now that you need to have it. If you don't have it, then you're not going to succeed.
Yeah, puppies will die, right? Unicorns will.
Yeah.
So all that stuff, right? But yeah, I'm gonna have the link for this, guys, in the description. For this book on Amazon, so you guys can go pick that up. Someone that comments below and defines red team penetration testing, the teams, actually have a free copy that I'll send out to you. So do that, comment below, define that properly. If you've read the book and go that, I actually have another copy that I'll send out to you or a colleague or a friend. So just to let you guys know.
Make people do some homework. That's good.
As we know, we're in the IT cybersecurity field. If you're not doing some homework, you're not working hard enough, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Awesome, Joe. Thank you so much for your time. This was amazing to kind of learn and just have this conversation with you. Like I said, I really liked the book. I enjoyed kind of going through it a few times, and just really kind of sparked my knowledge and education on when it comes to, like you said, vulnerability, pen testing, and the red team.
Very good. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, guys. I just want to say thank you so much for watching this. Again, remember the book's going to be below a description. If you have any questions for Joe, let me know. Comment below. I'm sure Joe's going to be watching this. He's hasn't been doing too much consulting as he's working full time now. But your website is threatexpress.com. Is that correct?
Yep.
So if you guys have any questions,
that is where we keep our blogs, and the companion website is redteam.guide.
Redteam.guide, and then that's also in the book as well. You can also follow Joe on Twitter and on LinkedIn. I'll actually put his Twitter address below so you guys can connect with him and just tell him how much you guys love the book. All right.
Yeah, I'm easygoing. I will respond and talk to anybody who has questions. I do it quite often, so no problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joe. So guys, I just want to remind you, don't forget, software is hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.